So it's considered to be the earliest high culture of Central America. Everybody's heard about the Aztecs. Everybody's heard about the Maya.
For centuries, textbooks painted the Aztecs as latecomers who simply inherited the ruins and knowledge of vanished civilizations. Yet, new genetic research reveals a shocking pattern. Entire male lineages of these earlier peoples disappeared repeatedly, replaced by fresh bloodlines just before the Aztecs emerged. What if the Aztec Empire was not just a cultural ascent, but a biological takeover, founded on a landscape shaped by violent genetic erasures? This hidden history forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the birth of Mesoamerican civilization and the role DNA plays in rewriting ancient stories. Genetic gaps in ancient civilizations. Beneath the impressive ruins and towering pyramids of Mesoamerica lies a hidden genetic mystery that challenges our understanding of those early cultures. DNA analysis reveals that the male lineages of some of the greatest ancient civilizations.
We can see every single modification the Mayas did, not just only the major architecture features.
Such as the Olmec, Maya, Toltec, and the builders of Teotihuacan abruptly vanish from the genetic record. This disappearance is not a simple fading away, but a startling break, as though entire branches on the family tree were cut off. These were not gradual changes, but sudden shifts that left behind ruins filled with silence instead of descendants. For centuries, historians assumed populations merged smoothly over time, blending cultures and genetics alike. This made sense when artifacts and language seemed to flow continuously from one civilization to the next. But genetic evidence tells a different story, one of sharp discontinuities rather than seamless transitions. The absence of these male lineages reshapes how we think about inheritance. It suggests that something erased or replaced these men, while other threads of ancestry quietly persisted. What makes this phenomenon even more perplexing is that women's genetic lines, their mitochondrial DNA, continued unbroken. Maternal lineages show continuity where paternal ones break down. This means that while daughters, mothers, and grandmothers survived and were absorbed into new populations, the men, the warriors, rulers, and fathers simply disappeared from the genetic landscape. This raises difficult questions about the ancient social upheavals responsible for such selective loss. The full implications of these disappearances have only become apparent with the relatively recent advent of ancient DNA sequencing. Before modern genetic tools, the story was told only through ruins and artifacts, silent witnesses who could not answer who vanished or why. Now, DNA becomes the voice of forgotten peoples, whispering truths hidden beneath centuries of assumption. Understanding why these male lines ended is central to unraveling the story of the Aztecs and their predecessors. Further intrigue comes from the scale and repetition of these genetic gaps. Multiple great Mesoamerican centers experienced this phenomenon. Teotihuacan faced one of the sharpest male lineage disruptions around 550 AD, coinciding with its violent decline. The Maya civilization, too, saw breaks in paternal lines during its mysterious collapse. Even the Toltec Empire's male genetic signature nearly disappears after its fall. These are not isolated incidents, but a pattern playing out again and again across centuries. Given the vast influence these earlier civilizations held, the sudden disappearance of their male descendants raises the question: what forces could cause such an organized, wide-scale erasure? More than just warfare, this selective genetic reset points toward a recurring, systemic process. It is as if the men were the targets of a ruthless replacement strategy, yet the women, the carriers of cultural and genetic memory, remained embedded within shifting populations. Yet these losses are puzzlingly absent from the historical record, which focuses on conquests, kings, and monuments rather than the everyday people whose bloodlines were broken. The DNA shows a story of ghosts, fathers erased without a trace, leaving behind cultures that thrived on knowledge, art, and architecture but lacked direct biological continuity. It hints at a violent past behind the grandeur, one that DNA alone can illuminate. Transitioning from vanished fathers to their replacements reveals a cycle of collapse and renewal written in the very chromosomes of those who lived and died in this land. Patterns of collapse and replacement. The story of Mesoamerican history, as told by genetics, is one marked by repeated cycles of collapse and replacement, particularly among male lineages. Instead of a slow, steady progression of one culture evolving into another, DNA reveals sudden jumps where entire male populations disappear within a single generation. These wipes are often linked with urban destructions, such as the burning and abandonment of great cities like Teotihuacan around 550 AD. What happened was not gradual demographic change, but dramatic genetic ruptures coinciding with societal upheavals. When cities fell, temples were razed, and empires crumbled, the male lines etched in the land's DNA also vanished. A new group of men appeared, often from outside the region, whose Y chromosomes replaced those of the previous inhabitants almost overnight. This pattern repeated at multiple sites over centuries, echoing like a persistent drumbeat of extinction and renewal. Such genetic shifts are far too consistent to be the product of random chance or minor population blends. Instead, they suggest intense episodes of conquest, displacement, or even genocide, though much remains uncertain. Historical warfare often targeted men, kings, warriors, and laborers in the heat of conflict, while women were spared, assimilated, or absorbed into the victors' communities. Over time, these cycles purified the paternal genetic lines of a region, even while preserving maternal ancestry. The scale and frequency of these events are staggering. Entire populations, including the elites responsible for society's structure and knowledge, were wiped from the genetic scene multiple times within a millennium. It wasn't merely the fall of a kingdom, but the biological erasure of its male heirs. With each collapse, a new group's male lineages took dominance, reordering not just political control, but the genetic fabric of the region. The genetic upheaval has completely changed the existing definition of how we determine inheritance. The transmission of cultural and genetic heritage from one generation to the next was disrupted because paternal heritage disappeared. Then it returned, only to disappear again. The violent interruptions created genetic emptiness, which new groups from outside the area came to populate. Mesoamerica exists as an identity-changing territory where people continually build new societies, which they establish upon grounds that bear marks of destruction. The genetic patterns demonstrate how cultural knowledge survives through broken blood relationships. The recurring collapses did not erase entire societies, only parts of their biological lineage. The process through which civilizations rebuilt themselves establishes different complexities because they have used adoption, cultural exchange, and strategic integration to build their new existence. The Aztec social advancement speed can be understood better through the concept of balance between destructive forces and continuous existence. The interplay between lost male lines and persistent female ancestry reveals something unique about how ancient Mesoamerican societies were structured and how their people endured amid turmoil. The role of women's lineages. While the male genetic lines of many ancient Mesoamerican civilizations abruptly ended, the maternal lines show a strikingly different story, one of persistence and survival. Mitochondrial DNA, passed down from mothers to children, remained largely continuous through periods of collapse and conquest. This contrast suggests that women played a vital, stabilizing role in an ever-changing social and genetic landscape. This preservation of female lineages indicates that women were often absorbed into conquering populations as wives, mothers, or community members. Their genetic heritage thus passed forward, bridging communities even when the previous generation's male leaders disappeared. This gendered pattern mirrors historical realities where conquerors might slay or displace enemy men, but integrate women to maintain population and preserve some cultural continuity. The survival of female ancestral lines amidst the repeated male-side genetic wipes creates a paradox. It means that while societies retained some biological connection to their past through mothers and grandmothers, the men who shaped power and identity were systematically replaced. The long-standing foundations of Mesoamerican cultures relied as much on these maternal threads as on the shattered male lines. This affects how we interpret cultural transmission. The presence of enduring maternal genetics supports the idea that traditions, knowledge, and social roles were carried and passed down through women. Meanwhile, new male lineages arrived with shifts in political power.
All of this brilliance was at the service of the most powerful Maya kings, considered gods among men.
Martial conquest, and population movements. Together, these processes formed a complex mosaic of continuity and change. Women's enduring genetic signature also points to the possibility that social structures may have favored the survival and integration of local female populations. Marriages, alliances, and cultural adaptation gave new ruling groups both legitimacy and stability. This helped explain how vast empires like the Aztecs could absorb diverse peoples, yet maintain cohesion. Such patterns challenge simplistic views of conquest as total displacement. Instead, they suggest a nuanced dynamic where societies rebuilt themselves with each wave of newcomers blending with the native women who remained. It was a cycle of loss and renewal shaped by both violence and integration. The preservation of these maternal lines ultimately paints a portrait of resilience. Ancient peoples who, despite upheaval and erasure, passed forward vital parts of their identity and heritage. This ongoing maternal continuity sets the stage for understanding the Aztecs' unique genetic arrival as newcomers with intact paternal lines entering a land of ancestral mothers. Emerging from this turbulent history, the Aztecs stepped into a fractured world ready for new leadership, their genetic story intertwining with those who came before and those who endured. Aztec arrival and genetic advantage. When the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico around 1325 AD, they did not come into an unoccupied land as many myths suggest, but into a landscape deeply scarred by centuries of upheaval. The genetic record reveals that the male lineages of earlier civilizations have been largely erased, leaving behind a population of women with broken paternal ancestry. Into this fractured world walked the Aztecs, carrying with them intact Y chromosomes
have no Y chromosome echo, nor do they have any mitochondrial DNA signature
that set them apart as something new and different. They were not survivors of collapse. They were fresh blood in a land of shattered bloodlines. This timing was more than coincidence. The Aztecs' arrival coincided with the existence of vacuums in male genetic heritage, a biological opening waiting to be filled. Their strong paternal lineages provided a foundation for rapid expansion and consolidation, enabling them to establish dominance politically and genetically. As their empire grew, so too did the spread of their distinct male ancestry across central Mexico. They integrated with local women whose mitochondrial DNA survived the past upheavals, blending cultures and genetics in a way that reinforced their power. DNA evidence confirms that this was not a gradual assimilation, but a swift genetic conquest. Male Aztec lineages rapidly became dominant throughout the region, outpacing the remnants of previous civilizations. This suggests deliberate strategies of conquest and integration, not just accidental population growth. The Aztecs were literally becoming the fathers of regions where the original paternal lines had vanished. Their rise was, in genetic terms, a takeover written in blood rather than just written in history books. The Aztec Empire's efficiency was rooted not only in military might or culture, but also in this genetic advantage. Their intact male ancestry offered a kind of continuity and identity impossible for many earlier groups whose paternal heritage had been shattered. This biological edge may have contributed to their ability to organize vast territories, manage complex tribute systems, and coordinate multi-ethnic populations with administrative precision. Their genetic legacy became entwined with their political and cultural ones, but the Aztecs did not simply impose their bloodlines. They also absorbed people from conquered territories. Studies show dramatic shifts in maternal lineages within Aztec domains, suggesting large-scale movements and integration of women from diverse regions into the empire's heartland. This reshuffling of families and genes was both a deliberate and efficient strategy, helping to create bonds of loyalty and unity that transcended local identities. Through marriage and kinship, the Aztecs expanded their influence both politically and genetically. The existence of an empire created an extensive territorial system that linked different ethnic groups through military control and their shared blood ties and cultural traditions. The Aztecs maintained power through their system of local government, which employed local leaders to maintain control over their territories, while the leaders showed loyalty to them. The preservation of existing relationships between various groups of people through military conquest and territorial expansion established imperial power. The genetic lineage of the ruling class originated from new male bloodlines, while women maintained familial ties through multiple generations. Each empire needs more than soldiers. It needs words and culture to bind diverse peoples together, a force as powerful as blood itself. Language and integration as conquest tools. One of the most powerful instruments of Aztec control was their language.
Then they began to look at it. Then they found that this culture had a language, a fully developed written script.
Nahuatl. Far from being a mere means of communication, Nahuatl acted as a tool of imperial integration, weaving together the empire's vast and varied peoples. When the Spanish arrived in 1519, they were astonished to find Nahuatl widely understood, far beyond the Aztec heartland. It was spoken by traders, messengers, and citizens from deserts in northern Mexico to Central American jungles, demonstrating the reach of Aztec influence. Language travels with people, and wherever Nahuatl went, its speakers followed, carrying their genetic heritage as they moved. Merchants, soldiers, priests, and administrators all spread both words and bloodlines across the empire and beyond. This marital and migratory movement linked distantly scattered populations into an interconnected web, strengthening Aztec control. Genetic studies show patterns of mixing consistent with these long-distance routes, confirming that language and genes moved hand in hand. For conquered groups, adopting Nahuatl meant access to markets, bureaucratic positions, and opportunities within the Aztec system. The language created incentives for assimilation, encouraging families to integrate culturally in exchange for social and economic advancement. Over time, many communities didn't just submit to Aztec rule, they became Aztec in identity as well as governance. This cultural and genetic integration was a cornerstone of empire building. Such linguistic dominance contributed to the empire's stability. Knowing Nahuatl allowed diverse peoples to communicate, trade, and participate in governance, linking regions otherwise divided by language and custom. This unity in diversity made it easier to administer tribute, enforce laws, and coordinate military efforts. It was a subtle but effective form of conquest, less visible than swords, but no less powerful. Moreover, the spread of Nahuatl predates the empire itself. Archaeological finds show Aztec-related words and symbols in regions where Aztec armies never marched, suggesting earlier movements of Nahuatl-speaking peoples established networks of trade and culture. This deeper history points to a long process of cultural expansion and influence that the Aztecs inherited and amplified. They did not invent these systems. They stepped into a world partially prepared for their rise. This cultural groundwork complemented the genetic strategies of conquest perfectly. The fusion of language and lineage created an empire sustained not only by military force, but by social bonds and mutual benefit. Intermarriage between Aztec nobility and local elites formed blood ties that reinforced political allegiance. Language and genetics intertwined to create a living, evolving empire of people. Ultimately, the Aztecs mastered the art of integration. Their empire was as much an empire of blood and words as of territory and armies. This combination allowed them to reshape Mesoamerica in their image, overlaying new identities on a landscape marked by centuries of change. But beneath all this surface power was still another layer, a more ancient mystery woven into the very genetics of the continent itself. From language and empire, the story leads us deeper into the hidden threads of migration and identity that stretch back far beyond the Aztec rise. Broader implications and ancient migrations. Beneath the grand narrative of the Aztecs lies an even older and stranger genetic mystery, one that forces us to rethink the earliest chapters of human migration into the Americas. In 2015, scientists discovered a genomic signal linking populations deep in the Amazon to Australasia, thousands of miles across the Pacific. This ancient connection predates the Aztecs by millennia and does not fit the traditional model of migration solely via the land bridge from Siberia to Alaska. Instead, it hints at a complex mosaic of early human movements across oceans and continents. This Australasian genetic signature is patchy and concentrated in certain regions, especially the Amazon basin, while virtually absent elsewhere in the Americas. The pattern suggests these early populations were once more widespread, but were gradually replaced or absorbed over thousands of years. In other words, from the very dawn of human presence in the New World, waves of migration, mixing, and displacement shape the genetic landscape. This long history of population turnover continues the pattern observed among Mesoamerican civilizations, the cycles of collapse and replacement evident in Aztec-era Mexico.
The Aztecs called them. They called them the Olmecs, and it means the rubber people because that rubber-producing area of Mexico.
Echo broader continental dynamics stretching back over 15,000 years. Human groups arrived, thrived, declined, and were supplanted repeatedly, creating a palimpsest of genetic and cultural identities across the Americas. The Aztecs were not an anomaly, but the most recent example in a long chain of renewals and disruptions. Their empire's rise fits into this vast rhythm of arrival, conquest, genetic reshaping, and sometimes decline. The overall population patterns between human groups led to genetic and cultural heritage results, which demonstrate how they were affected by human migration into different areas. The Aztecs inherited a world layered with histories, stories, and peoples, many lost or altered by long cycles of dominance and displacement. The genetic slate of the continent was completely erased and then rewritten multiple times, which made it extremely difficult for any single lineage to survive. Modern Native American populations today have multiple ancestral ties that form their genetic heritage. European colonization brought about a second round of violence, which caused significant changes to human genetics. The Spanish Empire began its military campaign against the Aztec Empire after it established a base on the Mexican coastline in 1519. The bloodlines that emerged from the Aztec Empire period have continued through to the present day. The Aztec genetic heritage demonstrates their historical territorial claims, which have remained intact to this day. DNA testing provides scientists with a powerful method to explore historical events through its application in this ongoing research project. DNA testing shows how regular people in history blended their backgrounds and vanished from view, according to historical documentation. The study reveals hidden social dynamics, which include the elimination of specific male genetic lines and the combination of maternal genetic lines and the immigrant groups who continually enter the society. The genetic revolution challenges us to look beyond familiar stories and embrace a richer, more intricate past. The Aztec Empire's story is one of conquest, survival, and genetic transformation, woven from vanished ancestors and new beginnings. DNA reveals hidden truths, reshaping how we understand history itself. If you found these revelations captivating, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of our past.